Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you, many kings and prophets have desired to see what you see, and have not seen it. To hear what you hear, and have not heard it. I thank you, Father, for hiding these things from the learned and the wise, and revealing them to the innocent and the simple.
Tornado warning.
Tonight, a full-on tornado outbreak is hammering the south. This massive funnel cloud caught north of Miramar Beach, Florida. Waterspouts crashing ashore. In Atlanta, tornado sirens sound the alarm as residents shelter in place.
You need to seek shelter immediately.
This after more than 24 reported twisters overnight.
It looks like a war zone up here.
Residents emerged from storm shelters to utter destruction.
The damage here is absolutely awful.
At least 3 killed in the town of Rosalie, Alabama. The tornado, a massive EF2, wind speeds over 110 miles an hour. This daycare in Flat Rock flattened. You can see the toys among the wreckage. 3 adults and 3 children who took shelter here seriously injured. Whoa. The storm's cutting a deadly path from Mississippi.
We're really lucky that nobody was hurt here tonight. It could be the other way.
To Tennessee, where 2 more people were killed in the storm as they still deal with raging wildfires.
Disaster struck an evangelical church in the heart of Jerusalem recently. As Chris Mitchell reports, it appears Muslim militants destroyed the facility where the church has met for the last 10 years.
But this is it. It's all of Karen's stuff. Everything. This is what's happening to Living Bread Church, right here.
Michael Hilsden, a former volunteer at Living Bread Church, recorded what happened. Most of the church property and personal belongings of its pastor were burned in this dumpster.
Everything's burnt. Everything. Cool.
It was an act, really, I felt, of terror.
Karen Dunham pastored the Living Bread Church for 10 years. On Saturday, November 24th, Muslim neighbors came into the building and ransacked it.
They've destroyed everything inside. That dumpster right there is full of stones. They tore out the floor, they pulled out the wiring, they punched holes in the walls.
This is what the church used to look like. This is what it looks like now.
For the tens of thousands of civilians who fled rebel-held Aleppo, it must have felt like even the weather deserted them. Huddling under blankets for warmth, they sleep cheek to cheek in makeshift shelters. For many, this is their first meal in days. The United Nations estimates that 200,000 are still inside eastern Aleppo. Trapped between the Syrian army and rebel fighters, the relentless shelling continues. The UN has demanded a pause in the fighting to allow for the evacuation of the sick and injured and the delivery of food and medicine. But the Syrian government has answered with silence. Its main backer, Russia, talks about opening humanitarian corridors, but so far that's all it is, talk. The government's 5-month siege has left food and medical supplies dangerously low, while hospitals have been blown to pieces. As the rebel territory shrinks under the advance of the Syrian military, desperate civilians make one last run for safety.
Ukraine has launched missile drills near Russia's border, with which Kiev is at loggerheads over a range of issues. The military exercises involve air defense units, military drones, and S-300 ground-to-air missile systems. Ukrainian officials say the 2-day military drills are going ahead as planned and in line with international law. Russia has condemned the military exercises. The Kremlin says the maneuvers violate its maritime borders. Moscow has also threatened to shoot down the missiles if they threaten its territory. Relations between the two countries have been strained since the crisis began in eastern Ukraine in 2014. The relations worsened further after Crimea rejoined Russia following a referendum in 2014.
In a science classroom in Utah this week, more than 24 kids were trapped by a classmate armed with 2 guns. That's where the story takes a surprising turn.
Shooting with a gun at Miller Park Junior High in Bountiful.
This time it was a 9th grader armed with a 12-gauge shotgun, a 9mm pistol, and boxes of ammunition. A teacher called 911.
He has a gun. He has a gun.
But this time, the outcome was so much different.
Where's the student now with the gun? Yes, his parents have them and both the loaded guns. Parents have the student? Yes.
The parents ran to the room, entered the room, were able to grab hold of the firearms.
Chief Tom Ross says the gunman's parents noticed he was behaving oddly at home that morning. When they found 2 guns missing from their safe, they headed straight to school.
And when they were just a short distance away, actually heard a gunshot fired.
26 students were in the classroom when the teen fired the shotgun into the ceiling. Dan Fowers was watching.
I heard a gun cock, and then I looked up. I saw the shot go off. Everyone got under a desk, and I saw some people crying.
Students reunited with their parents outside. Dan's mom, Kristen, says they're lucky.
I am so grateful to those parents. I am so grateful that they were, paying attention, because the outcome could have been so much worse.
And now to Saudi Arabia, where sub-zero temperatures in recent days have led to an unusual sight, a blanket of snow in the desert. Now, Saudi Arabia has a hot desert climate, but now snow covers desert sands in the central and northwestern regions. Cars are skidding on roads because many motorists are unfamiliar with driving over ice. But excited Saudis are making the most of it as some make snowmen and have snowball fights.
6 people have been killed during fresh Saudi airstrikes in northwest Yemen. The raids, which hit 2 towns in Saada province, also left a number of people in. The attacks targeted civilian residential areas. Saudi Arabia started its war on Yemen in March 2015. The war has so far left over 11,400 people, mostly civilians, dead. Yemeni army forces have also launched attacks in retaliation for the Saudi regime's deadly aggression over the past months. In the latest development, Yemeni snipers killed at least 2 Saudi soldiers in the kingdom's Jazan province.
Well, as winter approaches and the mosquitoes disappear, many Americans expect the spread of Zika to slow down. But that may not be the case. The Texas Department of Health announced that they're dealing with what might be the first case of locally transmitted Zika in the state.
European markets are jittery this morning after Italian voters rejected constitutional reform Sunday. As Dale Hurd explains, the move is widely seen as a referendum on the European Union.
European leaders have been urging calm after the biggest body blow to hit the EU since Brexit, the British vote to leave. Italian voters said no to proposed constitutional reforms that became a vote of confidence on membership in the European Union. In voting no, Italians sent a rebuke to the establishment, which had staunchly backed the referendum. As promised, Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi resigned after the defeat. This woman, who was in favor of the government plan, said, "I think we are a country that is really good at destroying. We're really good at coming together when it's a chance to destroy the upteenth ship that is trying to build itself." This man, who was against the government plan, said we could not go on any longer like this. The Italian people cannot take it anymore. If authorities don't understand, then slowly we will make them understand. The vote has energized the anti-establishment 5 Star Movement and the anti-immigrant Northern League. Northern League leader Matteo Salvini said the Italian approach is no longer to serve the European Union, but to act as equals. Never again a government with the socialist of the European Union. This is clear. Never again servants of a mistaken currency or of a crazy banking system. During the campaign, the risk of political instability in Italy, Europe's 4th largest economy, triggered market reaction, with bank stocks sinking and borrowing costs on sovereign debt rising. In Brussels, officials said all was still well.
I'm very confident in the capacity of the Eurozone to resist to all kinds of shocks. I think that we have now a very solid system.
But there are more shocks on the way. The man who could be the next president of France, François Fillon, said France could tilt more toward Russia. The most popular party in the Netherlands is Geert Wilders' anti-EU Party for Freedom. And so it appears Europe is turning to the right and away from the European Union. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in South Sudan has warned of ethnic cleansing and an escalation of sexual violence there. The commissioner says that violence has forced over 1 million people to flee the country and displaced another 1.8 million, mostly from South Sudan's Equatoria region. The African country slid into crisis in 2013 when President Salva Kiir accused his deputy Riek Machar of planning a coup against him. The two sides then got involved in a cycle of retaliatory killings that have split the impoverished country along ethnic lines. South Sudan's conflict has left thousands dead on both sides.
Now, the European Union's law enforcement agency says terror networks such as Daesh are evolving their tactics to attack soft targets on the continent. In a report, Europol underlined that terrorists tend to copy the modus operandi used by terror groups in Middle Eastern countries. So it said they might use deadly car bombs and improvised explosive devices to hit their targets in Europe. According to the report, the group responsible for deadly attacks in Paris a year ago and in Brussels in March wanted to deploy such devices until police actions forced them to change their plans. Europol has also voiced concern that Libya could become, quote, a second springboard for Daesh after Syria to strike targets in Europe and North Africa.
Now, the U.S.-led coalition has admitted that dozens of civilians have been killed in its airstrikes in Iraq and Syria in the past 7 months. The coalition said in a statement that 54 people lost their lives between March 31st and October 22nd. It also said up to 24 people died in a strike near the Syrian city of Manbij. This brings to 173 number of civilians killed since the beginning of U.S. attacks in Syria and Iraq in 2014. Activists, however, say the figure is much higher. According to the so-called Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, in one particular attack last month, nearly 24 civilians, including a child, were killed in a village near the Syrian city of Raqqa in a U.S. air raid.
The most important thing about being free is individual sovereignty, because it began really back in the 1840s, less than 75 years after the formation of the United States of America, when they gave the power of the individual to corporations, but none of the penalties. None of the penalties.
The issue is the earth. We cannot change the political system. We cannot change the economic system. We cannot change the social system until the people control the land, and then we take it out of the hands of that sick minority.
The unyielding corporocratic encroachment of the $3.7 billion Dakota Access Pipeline at Standing Rock in the Dakotas is essentially the painful opening of a very old wound in American history. This deliberate neglect of the established rights expressed in the Treaty of Fort Laramie met resistance April 1st, 2016 at Sacred Stone Camp by Standing Rock Historic Preservation Officer LaDonna Brave Bull Allard. In September, Allard said, "If we allow an oil company to dig through and destroy our histories, our ancestors, our hearts and souls as people, is that not genocide? Most Americans need only witness the lopsided attack on the American culture of the Sioux people, defending their land, drinking water, and the protection of our American heritage to realize that the existence of tyranny is very real in 2016.
As we go through American history, we see how they continue to put the handcuffs on American people. And now it's complete. We're a police state, no doubt about it.
This is how they learn to get people dependent through the the government agents that ran the programs to, quote, give the Indians food and blankets. It was all designed to starve you out and kill you. And now they admit this is their global plantation model. That's what the carbon tax, they admit, is to shut off all of our energy, the equivalent of shutting off the buffalo to the Native Americans.
See, the Native people, yes, we have the land, and they wanted the land, and it's about the land, you see, but the real enemy to the industrial ruling class is those who think differently. It's about sharing and taking care, and it's about respecting the earth, and it's about spirit, and it's about these. See, so this is the perceptional reality that we came from. This is how we knew and recognized reality. See, this is what was the threat. Exterminate the spiritual perceptional reality. That's what it's been all about.
The federal hypocrisy looms large when during the 2014 standoff, the BLM issued a hyperactive protective order in respect to the endangered desert tortoise, attempting to gain the upper hand on the Bundy's grazing rights. That role is now reversed at Standing Rock as the potential for future poisoning of the Oahe Reservoir threatens the endangered pallid sturgeon, a species of fish that dates back 70 million years that has already suffered enough from the progressive management of its habitat along the Missouri Missouri River. Why does conservation only apply to what is financially convenient?
That's what they want to do, a diaspora, and therefore, guess whose land they're after? In our meager holdings on trust land, over 40% of the natural resource wealth of America is still under and on our lands.
The behavior pattern of this, historically speaking, of this industrial ruling class never really changes. What changes is the technology, the terminology, and the generations. So for Wounded Knee Massacre, I think that forms of that massacre are taking place now today. The authoritarian emergence of the Patriot Act and all of these various mechanisms, controlling mechanisms, I think that they're psychologically massacring the American citizens mentally.
And now North Dakota Governor Jack Dalrymple is ordering a mandatory voluntary evacuation of the camp led by the Standing Rock Sioux tribe by December 5th, adding to the mounting tension. The Obama administration is claiming they are pushing the Army Corps of Engineers to finalize a rerouting of the pipeline. 2,000 veterans relieved the protesters at Standing Rock, and DNB, Norway's largest bank, has gotten cold feet.
They trade that reservation and the value of that reservation and the value of its people, the value of its air, the value of its carbon emissions are traded on Wall Street.